We have some wild news to go over today as a Pittsburgh Steelers player has come out and called out the Steelers coaching staff, including one coach in particular that has fans very fired up. I'd write that down, as well as discuss some wild details that have emerged surrounding this Steelers team under Mike Tomlin that is absolutely ridiculous. A ton to go over today, and fans are not happy following yesterday's loss. But before we get into it all, if you're part of the percentage or aren't subscribed to the channel, you guys have been absolute beasts of the support. It truly means the world to me, so make sure to hit that subscribe button. Ladies and gentlemen, yesterday was a rough loss to the Bears. There's no way to go around it. I had a video on it yesterday, but they are now in a very interesting spot. They have lost control of the division. The Ravens have overtaken them. And now, ahead of what's going to be a crucial next few games, we have some drama happening within the team, and it is surrounding Patrick Queen. As you can see here, schematic issues. Patrick Queen's facial expression speaks volumes over the Steelers' coverage woes. And obviously, they are one of the, if not the highest paid defense in football. They made the acquisition at the deadline, acquiring Kyle Duggar. But regardless of that, one of the biggest flaws to this team thus far this season, aside from the past few weeks, has been their defense. And Patrick Queen came out and said some very interesting things following Caleb Williams basically doing whatever he wanted, even though he was struggling offensively regardless. But you can see here, I think sometimes it was schematic issues that we had. It's kind of hard for two guys that are underneath defenders to try and guard two routes. That's overhanging off the hashes and stuff. As much as you try to get a bang or whatever it is, it's hard to do that. It's kind of a bad spot to be in. But at the end of the day, we just got to be better. Now, basically, he's calling out Teryl Austin here. Now, and Mike Tomlin, of course, he's the defensive, mastermind, if you want to call it, behind this team, or maybe just the defensive mind if you don't think he's great. But this isn't ideal because obviously you never want the players to call out the coaches unless it's warranted, and it is kind of warranted here. Caleb Williams threw for 239 yards, 3 touchdowns, didn't face a lot of pressure, and Caleb Williams, at least in my eyes, didn't look great for most of that game. He was overthrowing Rome Odunze. There was lots of times where, of course, Kyle Duggar could have had interceptions, among others. And you can see here in the article, the Steelers seem to play a lot of zone coverage, which they've been doing in recent weeks. Queen seems to think that the scheme is stressing too much on the linebackers when it comes to covering pass catchers down the field. And we saw that at multiple times, whether that was Malik Harrison. We saw some instances of that with Nick Herbig. And of course, they had a bunch of penalties in yesterday's game that shouldn't have happened regardless. But a lot of Williams' success came from throwing over the middle of the field and beyond the sticks. Sometimes it came with Malik Harrison at linebacker. Harrison rotates in with Peyton Wilson, who's had a great year this year. But we know Wilson's more of a rundown defender. They took advantage, and shout out to the Steelers coach over there, Taylor. I mean, he's been doing a great job, but at the same time, they were running some trick plays. He's an offensive mastermind, but it's pretty telling for Queen to blame some of the issues on schematics. Now, whether he's calling out Tomlin, whether he's calling out Teryl Austin, regardless, the linebackers this season, like the article says, they've had issues communicating and doing their job in coverage. When they struggle, so does the defense as a whole. And we're talking about all this in the game where at the start it looked like they were going to have not a breakout game, but a really season-defining defensive game. TJ Watt with the strip sack recovery, obviously got a touchdown out of it. They went up 14-7. Things were looking good. They got the ball back after a quick, I think it was 3 and out, but after a quick, turnover on downs by the Steelers, or by the Bears, sorry. And then it came to a point where, or I think they punted. Regardless of that, no, it doesn't really matter. It's minute details. They got the ball back at 14-7, and then of course they weren't able to convert. They went for it and fourth down multiple times. Wasn't able to get it done. But clearly, it's more than just, at least from the player's point of view, individual efforts and execution. Now, he also said that nothing the Bears did surprised the Steelers, that they were prepared well, but they just didn't execute. And it's the first time this season a player has come out and blamed the scheme for the Steelers' struggles. And it's not something that happens a ton. Usually, again, the offense is under Mike Tomlin. We've been seeing it for a while now, years, decades at this point. We're kind of coming to expect this is what happens. You either start really hot and collapse, or collapse and then finish the season hot, finish 9-8, and lose in the wild card round. But for this season, the defense looked really good there for a few games. But was it really something that changed? That's the biggest question. And you can see here that Caleb Williams was pressured on only 8 of his 37 dropbacks on Sunday, good for 22%, which is the lowest rate he has faced in a game this season. The protection was big, as Williams was just 1 of 6 for 4 yards under duress. And that's, like I mentioned, a few of those throws were to Rome Odunze. There should have been a few interceptions, but people are now starting to say fire Teryl Austin because you should have pressured him more. I think it's a little bit deeper than that. Of course, they have access to these stats as well. These are all accessible things. They didn't pressure Williams enough. It's clear as day. He was 1 for 6 under duress. He didn't really do a good job at throwing under pressure. They were saying it on the broadcast. JJ Watt, everyone was basically saying that when Williams had time and the O-line gave him time in the pocket, he threw dimes, right? He threw darts, and that's what ultimately won them the game. But when he was under duress, he was throwing some really bad passes, some that should have been, like I keep mentioning, absolutely intercepted, because it's a nightmare that happened yesterday. And it's wild to see. You don't usually see guys like Patrick Queen or anyone call out the defensive schemes. I'm curious to see what happens over the next few days here into practice this week, especially as Aaron Rodgers hopefully starts to return. We do have an update on that as well. But very interesting. Williams had 3 touchdowns. They won by 3, and we can blame the defense all you want. They could have had a chance to tie the game or, of course, take the lead and win the game in the final drive. Mason Rudolph decided to have a horrible drive there. And as you look at some of the advanced analytics here for the Steelers, where you expect them to land is exactly where they land. 15th, so perpetually mid. They're, fine offensively, fine defensively, but they're not elite at either. They, of course, got rid of George Pickens in the offseason, which is something they had to do. He was never going to, re-sign here. But at the same time, they're just mid. And you look at some of the other teams that we're going to be going up against. Of course, they play the Bills next week. You have some of the other teams within the division, outside of the division. The Ravens are right behind the Steelers, but they've been without Lamar Jackson for most of the year, and now they've overtaken the Steelers in the division. It's interesting. And then you look at some of these other stats. George Pickens himself and the Cowboys has more receiving yards than all of the Steelers' wide receiver core combined this season. So the total yards for the Steelers, 1,009 between DK Metcalf, Calvin Austin, Roman Wilson, and then George Pickens, 1,044. And people are saying Pickens was traded for a 3rd rounder. Now, does the trade look good in hindsight? No, but of course the context is there was issues, and reports came out there was issues within the locker room that they would have given him away for free or something like that because of how bad it was within the locker room. He was never going to extend in Pittsburgh, even though Pickens came out recently on an interview and did say that he has all love for Pittsburgh. He loves Mike Tomlin, that he could call him up right now and still have a good chat with him. So an interesting trade that might haunt the Steelers, but I don't think you can even think of it that way. They were never going to keep him. He would have left and walked in free agency after this year, in the last year of his deal. So that's that. Of course, I'm sure he'll, with the extension with the Cowboys, things like that. But it's interesting. And at this point in time, the bigger issue here is not Pickens, though. It's getting DK Metcalf involved. He's getting paid $30 million. He hasn't really done much the past few weeks. Getting the wide receivers involved. And a lot of that was because of Mason Rudolph's performance, but they need to get him involved. They had Roman Wilson over the top multiple times on go routes. Mason Rudolph just threw some horrible balls. So the remaining schedule looks rough. Bills, Ravens, both back-to-back extremely difficult games, and then Dolphins, Lions, Browns, Ravens. So you play the Ravens twice, you control your own destiny, but you also have to take care of business against the Bills, who had a mini bye week after losing, because they played Thursday, after losing to the Texans in pretty heartbreaking fashion. They're going to be coming out ready to go, and the Steelers have to be coming out ready to go as well. Quick before we wrap up here, Mike Tomlin did speak out on going for it, and I touched on this in yesterday's video, but going for it on 4th and 9 from their own 22 before they punted it. He said, I did not think about going for it. I was holding all 3 timeouts, and as you can see, we got the ball back. So, I mean, he's right. They didn't execute down the stretch. I'm not blaming that loss necessarily on Mike Tomlin, at least all of it, but they now face a gauntlet. You have to beat Miami, Cleveland, and Baltimore at least once to go 10-7 and win the division. You set yourself up good early in the season. You set yourself up now poorly, but you have to take care of business. See you guys later.